She did it. Robin Hobb did it. She made the perfect trilogy. One of only like 2 or 3 in existence, and one of them is Liveship Traders. This is my review of Ship of Destiny, again the 3rd book in the Liveship Traders Trilogy. It's phenomenal, it's incredible. I have 2 other rave reviews already about this book, and this is not going to be any different. This is another rave. It's so good. Robin Hobb, you're amazing. Alright, so obviously like the 3rd book in any trilogy, the purpose of this book is to bring the storylines and these characters to a satisfactory ending. To fulfill all the promises that were given in the first 2, to take it somewhere interesting, and hopefully in all of that to not be telegraphed or not be predictable, because we as a story listener want to be surprised. And this book does all of that. I found the ending incredibly satisfying, but also completely unpredictable. The story pattern in this trilogy is unlike anything you've seen. It's not a fetch quest, it's not a chosen one trope. It's just a good story that takes you along in its rush of happenings and character and developments. And even like, so this is about an 800-page book. Even on page like 600, 500, I had no idea how it was going to end up. But it did, and it didn't just end on the final page. It ended and gave us a lot of nice falling action to understand what's going to happen in this world after we leave it as the reader. Breadcrumbs from the very first prologue in the first book and the second book all pay off here. And not in the sense of that like Hobb felt constrained by those things, but just as a master storyteller knowing exactly what was going to come from this book. Hobb is a master. Her prose are fantastic. I enjoy reading this so much. I read Hobb books slowly, purposefully, because I just want to suck up every sentence and happening, and I want to think about what I'm reading about. It's hard to fall asleep as I read these books because there's so much happening. Astounding. Hobb is amazing, right up there with Erickson and Martin as my favorite working authors. Just tremendous. I've said a lot about Robin Hobb and this series already, and I can't say more without spoilers, so I'm going to end the spoiler-free section here to say this is an all-time great. Again, 5 stars, however you want to say it. Fantastic. You need to read the Liveship Trader Trilogy right now. Even if you read Farseer, the first trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings, and you didn't like it, read Liveship. Even if you had a DNF Farseer, read Liveship. It's a different type of story, and I think better. I liked Farseer a lot, but this is tremendous. Time for spoilers. I think the best way to talk about this is to just go through the characters and sort of rant my thoughts and emotions about them, because this book is so good. I don't think I can in an understandable linear way try to go through the story. So let's start out with Kennit, because for me he's the most, maybe not most, but he's an incredibly complicated character, because the whole time in this series, and I talk about this from the start, you can go back and watch my reviews and see how my thoughts on him are always like this, where we know he is a scumbag, he is awful, he's a scoundrel, and we shouldn't like him, but we also see shades of both like a darker past that has made him this way, that makes us sympathize with that, and shades of like the good part of him. We're always rooting for him to become that good person. And in some aspects of the story, he does. Even Althea, who is his one of his huge victims in this story, obviously, recognizes that he has pulled out of Wintrow what not even his definitely his father couldn't do, but not his mother, that no one saw this in Wintrow but Kennit. And as a point in his character, although he does cause destruction and awful things to happen because of the trauma that he has had, he didn't recycle that trauma in the same way, right? Like, the thing he struggles with is that he's attracted to Wintrow and wants to use him as he himself was used by Igrot. But he actually doesn't do that. He fights against that. Now, that's noble in its way until we know that he unleashes that fury and that darkness and that evil and that disgusting sexual violence upon Althea, another character that we love and respect so much. And it's awful. I'll talk about Althea in a little bit, but that is the nail in the coffin for Kennit. Even any positive things he did or positive feelings we, the reader, had about him, even as the charm says, you've gone too far this time. That is a hammer blow, and we immediately turn on him, right? And there's so much emotional stuff happening in that scene. I was just brokenhearted. And then for him to die at the end, right after he had like whatever the opposite of redemption is, poetically awful. Like, he's a tragic character, and a complicated one that even now, having finished it, I don't know exactly how to feel about him. The same is true of Etta. Etta is very interesting because she truly loved Kennit, and especially after the whole Althea thing, it's hard for us, at least for me as a reader, to understand why she is so attached to Kennit still. I sort of wish that she had more fully fallen for Wintrow and gotten love in that, but I think that's not probably accurate. I think how it happened is actually a much more organic way that happens, and I think her now having a child that both has the good parts of Kennit and is not going to be corrupted in the same way that Kennit was, and to have Wintrow, who is basically like a good version of Kennit without that darkness from an abuse and traumatic past, being the father figure, I think is a beautiful poetic ending to that cycle of violence and a way to end that. And at the same time, had this beautiful poetic end mark that named him Paragon Ludluck, incorporates all that the Liveship Paragon actually means and has gone through himself. Wintrow, the cool thing about his character growth in this third book, Shift of Destiny, is that we realize all of his character growth has already happened while we weren't necessarily paying attention, right? Like, when he becomes that person and that captain and the person who is all of a sudden basically the king of the Pirate Isles without having that title, we recognize that. He steps right into it and we're like, of course he did, because we saw his growth, and to do that so organically, Hobb is just a master. So I'm not going to say more about him because I think that is enough glory on its own. And I want to move to talking about Althea, who is, her and Malta, I think, would be the main protagonists of this whole saga if I had to pick one. I didn't see how a happy ending would happen for her, and I wasn't expecting one, and I'm so happy that we did. Because her struggle with pushing against the societal constraints and wanting to find her own destiny and who she was, and yet also loving Vivacia and not being able to be separated from her, and yet loving Brashan and finding this really good relationship, and then also being marred by the sexual violence, like so many layers of that. And then for Hobb to find a niche of a happy ending for her in the midst of this storytelling that isn't perfect, but it is a good ending, just fills my heart with joy. I love Althea, how she understands the world, how she reconciled with Malta and her family, and yet also was proven right and justified in so many ways. I mean, I'm not a woman and cannot claim to understand the experience of being a woman in this world, especially one that has suffered physical and emotional and sexual violence against them and abuse. But I felt I was able to understand a crumb of that emotional devastation when she wasn't believed by anyone. Even Jack didn't believe her when Kennit was lying about the assault on her, and only Althea and us as the reader know that that's actually what happened. And even at certain points had us doubt it because we were in her head while she was drugged and experiencing the doubt that she experienced and having people she loved who should protect her turn on her. Like, it was awful. It was just awful. And the Me Too movement, which I wholeheartly endorse and support, and we obviously need to listen to women in these circumstances and need to change the justice system around some of these things. The ending of this book gives us, those of us who have been privileged not to feel that, such a needed emotional empathy for what Althea is going for. And the incredible part of, like, Hobb has written in Althea, I think, the two most extreme parts of the sexual spectrum of experience, both in equally skillful ways. I think the sex scene between her and Brashan in the first book is the best I've ever read. It is titillating, but not in like a gross way, and yet also you feel the love and like what this means and the safety and the human bond being made through that physical act. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have this horrific rape scene that shows all the disgusting aspects of that, of one of the most awful things that can be done to a human. Hobb is an amazing writer. Althea is an incredible character. I also want to touch on Malta because she is also an incredible character. And like Wintrow, we now sort of recognize that a lot of her character growth happened way back in Mad Ship. But unlike Wintrow, where it's just sort of like assumed he's coming in, we spend more time with Malta's transformation as she is forced to be the servant of the satrap. And what's beautiful is we see all of who Malta was, her connivingness, her stealthiness, how witty she is, and all of these things that were put to bad use in the first book and sort of slowly changed in the second one now become heroic instruments in this final one, and how she's able to manipulate the satrap, and that is how the ending, the happy ending, happens. And the Chalcidians are defeated, and how the Kennit situation comes about, and that she is the one who recognizes Kennit for the scoundrel that he is immediately, and just her heroic journey is fantastic. Malta, and again Althea, are incredible in this book. I also love the ending and the climax of the serpents and the amazing imagination that comes up with this whole storyline of the Lord of the Three Realms and what the elderlings are and were, and how they are coming back into the world, and serpents becoming dragons, and the cocoons of memories being passed down, and how dragons work in this world, and then how wizardwood can be used. I mean, the intricacies of all of that are beautiful and unique and awe-inspiring in the best possible way. I am blown away by this series and Hobb as a writer, and this is why I love fantasy, because of books like these. Okay, so this is a minor spoiler for Farseer Trilogy, I guess. Not really, but that Amber is the Fool. I completely didn't see that coming till this book, till she carves Fitz's countenance upon the ship. I mean, part of it is probably my gendered expectations of the Fool and Amber and who they should be, and how they should act in front of me as a reader, but tremendous that Amber is skilled with her hands because of the river and all the hints about like how she knows how to act like a woman or fake to be a man in the first one. The earring question, why she wears the earring. A lot of this I didn't even recognize till I had a great discussion with Chris over at Chris Bookish Cauldron about this sort of stuff, and he pointed out more of these things that I hadn't recognized before. It adds such a depth of character to the Fool, because in the Farseer Trilogy, really you don't get a depth of the Fool until, at least in my memory, the third book in that trilogy. We know about them earlier on and sort of see some of that, but then it really comes back in the third book, and that relationship with Fitz develops more. At least in my memory, it's been a while since I got to Farseer, but that's my impression, and this really gives a lot of weight and backstory to the Fool as we move forward into the next couple of trilogies, which I know are going to revolve around the Fitz and the Fool, because that's Tawny Man and the Fitz and the Fool is some of the name of these books. I think that's tremendously done, and it's not over the top. A lot of people, when I said people should start with Liveship Traders Trilogy and the Realm of the Elder, like, oh no, there's spoilers for Farseer, and there's obviously connection to other books, and I understand that, and there are things you're going to get and not get, but I still think the quality of Liveship is such that I would still recommend people to start with that, and I'm recommending it to like someone like my wife, who I don't think is going to get involved in the whole Realm of the Otherlings, but will love and soak up Liveship Traders. So people are intimidated by the Hobb verse and trying to do all the realms of the Elder Rings. Just read Liveship Traders. It's incredible. I think you'll love it, and that will drive you to read other stuff. And I don't think there's that much of a... Well, I'm preaching to the choir here because all of you at the spoiler section have already read this book. So you have your own opinions and you're probably going to change. But that's going to be my policy moving forward. This is one of my all-time favorite fantasy, bar none. It's going to be in my top 5 whenever I release a top 5 or top 10 or whatever on this channel. Love it. Hobb, thank you for your work. Everyone out there, let me know in the comments what you think about this whole trilogy. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and just so you know, I started a Patreon recently, so if you want to support me and the channel, please join that Patreon. As always, first in, last out.